welcome back to Myth Informed. Today, Brian Edward is joining me. Sean Frasick, how you doing, Brian?
I'm doing good.
Awesome, man. Really excited. We have a special guest, Ron Miscavige, today. And the idea today is Leah Remini and Mike Rinder just had a Memorial Day special, a 2-hour special on the A&E channel on the Scientology and the Aftermath show. And it was kind of a surprise. It kind of came out of nowhere, but it made a ton of buzz and social media was going crazy. And today we just want to talk about what we saw in the episode, get Ron's takeaways from it and his, some of the things that he saw that maybe some of us don't understand with some of it. But it was 2 hours and it was Leah and Mike Rinder and a whole host of a panel of other people at Ron.
And this just recently aired, May of 2017, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and so we'll just start right there, Ron. What did you think of the 2-hour special?
Oh, I thought it was great. I thought it was a very powerful, like that I would term like the MOAB, the mother of all bombs.
Yeah.
And they had people on there that, well, the one guy was a guy who was part of the plot against Paulette Goddard when they tried to put her in prison on false charges. And he confessed to his misdoings there. As a matter of fact, he went ahead and asked her for forgiveness because what they did in those days is they got a set of her fingerprints from some stuff they had in her apartment, and they planted them on a piece of paper when the paper said, "I'd like to kill you, you bastard," to Kissinger.
Now, who's
And
her? Who?
Paulette Goddard.
Paulette Goddard.
Yeah, she wrote a book in those days,
Right.
and it was critical of Scientology. Although, on the other hand, part of it was she said, as a matter of fact, I say it in my book, and my book is Rootless Scientology, My Son David Miscavige and Me. I said this in the book. In the end, if the church were just to take those things that you can learn at what I would say the bottom of the bridge. The Scientology experience is called the bridge to total freedom. There's data on communication skills, better interpersonal relationships. There's auditing or counseling that people would know it as, where you can get counseled on various parts of your life and actually have very good wins and become more effective in living your life. And part of her book was saying that that's what they should concentrate on. Yet they perceived her as an enemy, and built into the DNA of Scientology is these policy letters that L. Ron Hubbard wrote, such as fair game, where he says basically you can destroy a person who's an enemy of the church with no repercussions to you as the person who did it. Other policies where it says to utterly ruin a person if they come after you. Another one, find or manufacture data. This is part of their DNA, and it's coming to fruition these days because it's what they concentrate on. Like anybody who speaks out against them, such as Leah or Mike Rinder or Paul Haggis or various other people, they don't take up the issues that they're bringing up. They character assassinate the person. Mm-hmm. That's their modus operandi.
Yeah.
And with this guy who was on, he was part of that operation against Paulette Goddard.
Yeah.
And the only reason she didn't go to prison, because she was charged with these crimes, is the FBI raided the church. And they found that this operation was in place, and that saved her from going to prison.
When was that? When did the FBI make that raid?
I guess that was in the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was a hell of an experience. I mean, I was in the church. Look, I was a Scientologist from the 70s, 1970 till I got out in 2012 when I escaped. And I saw that church evolve from what it was into something other than what you'd expect out of a religion. Such as when I got in, I mean, it was like for a free spirit. It was really nice. I had some great times. And they just did a complete about face, went from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde.
Yeah.
And the concentration now is on attaining more and more real estate, saying that they're expanding. But they get these buildings, and the buildings are filled with air, not people.
Yeah.
See, here's the thing. eventually had to come to this with the advent of the internet. Prior to the internet, you could say anything you want, and you'd have one hell of a time trying to find out if that were true or not. Right now with the internet, you can find out about just about anything. I mean, there's a downside to it, too, because you can say anything you want, and there's no repercussion in most cases. But you'll find a lot of data, like about L. Ron Hubbard, about what the church has done, about their abuses and things. And with this, now, the demand for the product that Scientology has to offer is getting smaller and smaller. I mean, look, anybody knows this. Any successful business is going to expand to the degree that its product is demanded by people. As an example, let's say Starbucks. They started out with one little store, I guess, up in, what was it, Portland or Seattle, one or the other?
I think Seattle.
Yeah. Look at them now. There's a demand for that. There's a demand for that. There's a demand for Apple products, which are, I mean, really good products. What the church is offering now, there's not a demand for. You can build as many buildings as you want. You could build every one of them as beautiful as the Taj Mahal. People are going to stay away in droves. There's too many things exposed that they do, which is, and the main thing is the disconnecting families from each other, which is the reason that I wrote my book. And they know about that. They know about various abuses. You can just look on the internet. There's a new story just about every week.
One of the things I took away from the panel was the different conversations of what the church members did in Scientology for Scientology against those that were apostates or those that were critics of the church, and the guilt that they still had. One of the things that came up was Mike Rinder would look at flights for it was a Janet Reitman. That was one of the things that came up, that he was looking at her flight schedules and he knew where she was going, and it got real emotional at the end with the Goddard situation where he was essentially crying because of the things that he did for the church.
Yeah, he feels real remorse for that.
Yeah, so like there's really like a human experience there. Like when you leave, when you think you're doing something right because you're in the church and they tell you to. And then when you leave and you figure out, oh man, that was, I was harassing this person, I was making this person's life a nightmare. That's some remorse.
And Mike Rinder, for those who don't know, is kind of like one of the big wigs and carrying out some of the orders for Scientology. Right. Is that right?
Yeah, he actually was a spokesman for the Scientology.
Okay.
He eventually was in charge of OSA, Office of Special Affairs.
Got it.
Which is something that evolved out of the old Guardian's Office. The Guardian's Office was put in place for the job of protecting Scientology. They're the ones who engineered the raid on the government, where they got all these government files, and then I think it was about 10 people that were found guilty of this, and they went to prison.
Right. Okay, so this is like the Gestapo, if you will. Maybe that's too big of an analogy, but they're the ones that are going to take action if they see somebody hurting the brand.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and by taking action means sometimes fabricating things.
Right. And hurting mean you could add that you can harass people, you could physically harass them, you could there's all kinds of different hurts. Sure.
Yeah, and that was one of the takeaways I took. It's just the remorse that these people had since they've left. Just knowing you've done all that stuff.
There's a guy there by the name of Delderfield who is an actual licensed ticket agent. And he can go on his communication site and find out about who is on any flight, and that's how come they know about it.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they did it purposely for that reason, so they could keep track of people. Yeah, also, they could book their own flights, which is convenient because he's right there. But any flight that I were to take, they'd know I was on it.
Yeah. Well,
this FBI raid, though, were you aware of it when it happened?
I was aware of it, and I can remember... well, let's see. No, it was in the 80s. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, not that
I think it was
definitely pre-internet.
84, 86, something like that,
listen, I was at a local organization in Philadelphia, in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, and that's where the Philadelphia organization was in those days. And listen, the org, or the staff there, brought files over. And I had a fireplace in the house I had in those days, and I had an outside fireplace. And we must have spent 6 hours burning files.
Oh, wow.
This is while the raid was taking place in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And Yeah, so they wanted to make sure there was nothing there that just in case they were raided would be incriminating.
That's got to violate some kind of document retention policy.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't thought about this in any of the other interviews. This is the first time I ever realized that what I was doing. And I considered it like a Patriot Act kind of. Because look, when you become a Scientologist and you're going on study 2.5 hours a day, maybe 5 days a week, you're at the organization all the time, you're slowly being indoctrinated into a different way of thinking. And eventually you get to the point where you think that anybody who says anything bad about Scientology is lying or uninformed or purposely trying to destroy your church. You help out your church to go against that.
Yeah, you justify these actions, right?
Well, I don't know about justify it, but you immediately think they're no good.
Right.
And yeah, but that comes about slowly and gradiently in little bits and pieces where you become more and more of a true believer.
And tribal, right? That somebody's trying to get at your tribe.
Oh, yeah. It would be like that, yeah.
Well, and another thing that was making a lot of noise while the show was being aired, and Scientology was tweeting, and you had a bunch of people tweeting, live tweeting. Leah was tweeting, Mike and Ron was, and everyone. And Scientology was coming back at him. And one of the things that was being talked about a lot was an interview with Leah's father. And your Twitter account specifically was mentioned a couple of times, asking for your feedback on what do you think of this interview with Leah's father. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the story that I know is that Leah, as a young girl, her father left, and her mother and her grew up in the church, and she became very famous.
That's exactly right, yeah.
And now all of a sudden Scientology's interviewing her father to make her look like a bad person. Do you know about this situation?
What specifically? I knew her dad left, so...
Yeah, well, just recently Scientology did an interview with her dad.
Oh, yeah, I knew that, yeah. Well, people say many things, and sometimes they just say the first thing that comes to their mind, and it could be true, it could be a lie, but it's what they're thinking, and for whatever reason they say it, and I guess he said what he said because he felt it was the right thing to do. But listen, her mom raised her, Leah, on her own dime and her own effort and own wanting to win, became a major actress, had a successful sitcom, and it was her money that actually contributed to raising the family for the rest of the way, and she supported everybody. I do know that. I know Leah personally, and I know her since the first day she got the role. I happened to be in a place called Celebrity Center, and I was in an office they call the president's office, and this girl came in and said, I got the part. I said, what do you mean? She says, I got the part. I said, well, like what? She said, well, there's a new sitcom, and I got the part, and it's called The King of Queens. And she came over, gave me a hug. I gave her a hug, and that's how I met her. And she worked her butt off to stay in that show and just kept honing her acting skills and stuff. And she's a very nice person. I'll tell you one thing about Leah. You want to get into a fight with her, she will not lay down. She will not put her tail between her legs. She's from Brooklyn. And look, I tell people, and I've mentioned this many times, I got my doctorate degree in profanity in the United States Marine Corps. Leah can match me word for word. And this whole thing started with Leah. It started one moment over in Italy when Tom Cruise was getting married to Katie, and David was there, and his wife wasn't with him. His communicator was there. And she said to Tommy Davis, where's Shelley? Tommy Davis was kind of like the spokesman at that time. And Tommy Davis, in his arrogant attitude, said to her, you don't have the fucking rank to ask that question. If he had said,
I don't know.
No, he wouldn't say that. But if he said, Shelley's on a correction program, it would have been the end of it.
Wow.
See, because when you're in the Sea organization, sometimes you're a public person or you're in the public eye, and then somebody doesn't see you for a while, and the word gets out, oh, they're doing a correction program. That means you're off the main lines, you're getting auditing, or maybe you're doing work and you're getting interrogation. It's a normal thing.
So it doesn't have a negative connotation.
It could and it could not.
Is it like KP? Where okay, you've done something, but it's not diabolical.
Yeah, it's not like you're going before the firing squad.
Okay.
Even if somebody goes to the RPF, it's considered okay. Well, they messed up. They'll do the RPF until they get straightened out.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not like you're getting hung, get done.
So he says that, and she probably forgets about it.
She probably would have. That one moment could have changed this whole thing.
That's crazy.
That one moment, if he had just said, Shelley's on a correction program.
Yeah.
She may have said a couple more things, but she would have figured, oh, okay. That's
But
it.
the other thing I'm realizing is there's thousands of people to a Mike Rinder that's left, to a Ron Leah that's left. There's thousands of people that have left that haven't said anything, that have been very silent, and they don't want the church coming after them. But I think what Leah's show is doing, and it's giving them a voice. It's saying, look, I'm coming out.
Right.
Everyone needs to come out and start talking and telling what their real experiences are in this church, and telling, explaining why people should not be joining, and why it should not have its tax-exempt status, and why it should not be considered a church. And I think that's what the show is doing.
It is doing that. And more people are, mustering up the guts and a little bit of courage it takes to do it. Well, I don't know about a little bit, but a considerable amount, because you're afraid. They have like $3.5 billion is what I hear, and hot and cold running attorneys and private investigators, like the PIs who were following me, were getting paid $10,000 a week. Now, that's not pocket change, all right?
$10,000 a week is insane.
$10,000 a week, that's right. And all they had to do was follow me from 8 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, send in reports.
Quick math, that's I got almost $500K a year.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would like that job.
Yeah.
Or at least
So-
for the money.
But anyway, yeah. And the thing is, in my case, my big reason, the only reason for me writing the book is the disconnection policy. That to me is unforgivable.
Yep.
There's no reason that you should do that to another person.
Right.
And I wasn't going to do anything when I got out. All I wanted to do was, play some gigs. I'm a musician, and I sell an exercise apparatus that I've used called an Exergenie. I wanted to do that. And I wanted to write some humorous books, which I have. And
So you weren't jaded when you came out. You really just wanted to do your own thing and make your own way in the world.
Exactly. The thing that I couldn't take anymore, and there was a reason behind even that, is the fact that I was locked up on a compound. I couldn't drive off that base on my own intention or volition and go to a store to buy something. I just couldn't do that.
You would have had to have permission.
Well, not only that, but I'd have to have somebody with me.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So I'd have to have a minder with me. Like if I went to see a doctor or whatever reason, I'd have to have somebody go with me, either drive me or I could drive, but they would be with me. I couldn't send out a letter without it being read by security and making sure everything was okay. I couldn't make a phone call without somebody else on the other end of the line.
So you're like a North Korean athlete.
Yeah, like a North Korean athlete, especially the Americans who get captured, and then they do videos and say, "Oh, it's really wonderful here," and you don't see somebody with the Tommy gun in the background, just to make sure he says the right thing.
Right.
But the main thing, and I don't know if I ever told this, was we got a new musical director, and this may seem like a little thing, but it was a major thing in my life. Look, I've played music my whole life. When I was in England in the 70s, I got a recording deal with Polydor Records for my music and my playing. I got a writer's contract with Chappell's Publishing. I was asked by BBC to play on the air. That's a little bit of an accomplishment, okay? Nobody else in the music department had accomplished that. The guys were good musicians and everything, but that was a little bit of something that you had to have some talent.
You had a resume, sure.
That's right. You had to have some talent. BBC doesn't ask everybody to play on the air. We got a new musical director, and I had to write melodies, as that was my main occupation. I was a composer. I would write melodies day after day, week after week, month after month, and never got one melody approved to do on a video that we were doing.
These would be the Scientology promotion videos, right?
Yes, that's right. I couldn't take the fact that anything I did, it's like you, Brian. If you went to work and you did some particular thing and they said, nope, no good. Next day you went to work, you did something, no good. It's no good.
Right.
And you couldn't quit.
Yeah.
You couldn't quit and get another job. But now this went on for months. Think of how you'd feel having no production that you could put down that you did in that time.
Sure. Yeah, you'd feel worthless, right? I mean, that's the idea. One
Exactly.
song, 2, 3, 10 songs. Okay, maybe I'm not gelling right now, but zero. Okay.
Ever.
Yeah.
That's right. Of all things, that was the one thing I couldn't stand. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
You
I get
want to
it.
feel like you're value, you're doing something.
Everyone has to. I mean, that's why the person can die of a broken heart, right? Because if you don't feel valued in the world, right? So, and this is your career. It's obviously a big part of who you are.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, and another thing to get back to the 2-hour special that was really, and you know all of this, Ron, but I'm still learning. I knew Scientology had a large reach, but then to see a Janet Reitman, who is the the Rolling Stone contributing editor for the magazine, I mean, like that just blew me away.
Yeah,
the fact that she was in, and like the influence and power that Scientology has had or has is insane.
I don't get the question. No.
Yeah, I mean, I just seeing Janet, someone like that.
I think he's surprised to see how many people actually were in.
Yeah, well, and the
well, no,
types of
she
people.
wasn't really in. She got in just to investigate it.
Oh, is that her story?
Oh,
Okay.
that was it. Yeah, she didn't like want to get in there and say, I want them to help me. She was a writer, and she went in just to investigate it.
Oh, okay,
that doesn't
cool.
mean that you can't do a decent job of investigating.
Sure, right.
It also doesn't mean that it's going to be that fair. Let's face it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but nevertheless, she saw enough of it to be able to write a story, and they checked her flights when she flew there. They knew where she was staying, and that's part of what OSHA does.
Okay, that was the story.
That was the story.
And what did they
there.
do? So they were on to her that she was investigating?
Yeah, they found out she was investigating, and at that point, she becomes an enemy. And I don't know of all the things they said about her, but I know that anybody who would write a book that's unfavorable is going to be attacked, especially in the magazine they have called Freedom Magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And like everybody, like Mike Rinder, like Tom DeVocht, Paul Haggis, everybody is defrocked apostates. They were thrown out of the church, which is a lie. I'm sure they said I was kicked out, yet I escaped,
Mm-hmm.
And for the reason I just mentioned to you, but mainly, and as underlying rottenness I felt because of going to work every day and failing, quote, quote, unquote, in their eyes. Meanwhile, I play in about 4 different bands here in this area.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in demand to play. I play down up at a jazz festival in Fox Lake, Bunny Berrigan. I play in Illinois with the band down there. Great musicians, and I have a great time doing it. All of a sudden, I learned how to play after I left. Yet, it was said about me that I was a failed musician, and I couldn't play third trumpet in the band. This is what they do.
Well,
so I'm sure they said similar things about Janet Reitman, about Mike Rinder. He was terrible. It was no good. We knew it all along. Yet he was the spokesman for the church at events.
Mm-hmm. No. Well,
Look,
actually,
guys, I'm telling you, if you're trying to make sense out of this, we might as well just go and have a drink someplace. It's true. It's insane.
Yeah.
Right. Well, no, you can't. You can make sense of narcissism. It seems like if you take it down to someone's had a bad employer, there's always the employer that will say, no one's ever quit. Every person's left was fired. Right. You know that's a narcissist.
Right.
That, and I've met people like that. No, they were fired. And you're thinking, oh, I've met that person. I talked to them as they were leaving.
Right.
No, they
well,
weren't
it's getting even worse for Scientology because there's so much now on the internet, and we had kind of talked about the internet that you can't make up these stories anymore. People are speaking out there, and that's what this show is doing. I think it's giving a platform on a major television network for people to tell their stories. That you can't just say, people are just getting fired. I mean, they're creating a platform where these people actually can tell what happened to them, and the bullshit propaganda line, the company party line or whatever, is debunked.
Does the narcissism drift down? Clearly, I think, in my opinion, there's a lot of narcissism at the top level. Does that drift down to the members in the middle, or you're the common man?
Well, okay. Look, let's say you have somebody at the top of an organization. Those closest to him are going to try to emulate his actions, to stay in good favor. As it goes down further down the line, it becomes a little bit watered down, and don't quite take on all the attributes. And the further you get away from that source of power, the chances are you could keep your own personality or your own attributes, but you would have to keep certain attributes up. That would be the party line in order to become, to stay as a member of the Church of Scientology.
There's certain taboos that you won't be able to do, or
That's right. And the main reason you'd have to do that is because of people writing knowledge reports. Anybody, listen to this. Anybody, anything untoward that is said or acted out toward the church and you feel is not right, you have to write a knowledge report. If you don't write it, and later on it's found out about, you will be considered just as guilty as the person who did it if you knew about it and you didn't write it up.
So if I am a Scientology member, and say I'm at a low level, I'm just a member, right?
Yeah.
I'm happy, and I hear something on, I don't know, the radio, or I hear a group of people talking at a bar, and they're saying something on Scientology. I'm compelled to write an email or write some kind of log and say I heard X, Y, Z.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you don't, I'm telling you.
And where do I keep that? Do I send it in somewhere, or do I just keep it in a box?
report,
You give it to the ethics department.
Okay.
Okay? You would turn it into the ethics department. And now that's on record. But I'm telling you, and I'll say it again, if you don't do it, and later on it's found out about by somebody else, and it was found out that you knew about it, you're considered just as guilty as the person who did it and that you didn't report. This is pretty insidious. And look, this doesn't happen overnight. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, in my book, which I'll say again, Rootless Scientology, My Son David Miscavige and Me, I go over how all this is achieved on a little by little gradient as time goes by. It's not done in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It's done little by little. And you actually build a little mental prison where there's certain actions that are okay, other ones that aren't okay. You build it in your own mind. You're trapped by your own mind. As an example, I heard this story many years ago, and I'd like to tell it. You know how to train fleas, as an example.
Okay.
Here's what you do. You take a bunch of fleas and you put them in a quart jar and put a lid on it. And you put some food in there so they could stay alive. And for days you're going to hear dunk, 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 where they're jumping and they hit that lid and they go down. After a while, you don't hear the dunk, dunk, dunk anymore. Take off the lid. They'll only jump as far as the lid was. They won't jump out. You could take a bus or some type of vehicle to that base in Hemet, California, go on the base and say to everybody, listen, if you get on the bus, we're going to give you $10,000. We'll give you an apartment. We'll give you a job, and you'll be able to lead your life out here. I don't know if anybody would get on it.
Right. It's that mental prison. And, when you guys were talking about leadership and how, the CEO org and just the regular people emulate that, it's analogous to me, and this is kind of, I don't know, Ron probably won't get this reference, but I know you will, Brian. In The Walking Dead, when you have Negan, and he has all of his people say he's Negan, and then when they show up and he's not there, they're acting as if they're him. I mean, I see, if you look at the Mike Rinder thing with Sweeney, and where Mike Rinder was going, just really treating him to the point where Sweeney loses the shit.
Well, that was Tommy Davis.
Oh, that's Tommy Davis. Yeah. Thank you. So Tommy was essentially emulating how David would handle the situation, in my opinion.
Probably. And I'll tell you this: no matter what they did, David would say he could have done it better. No matter what. But that's what those people, like right next to him, you have Religious Technology Center, RTC people. They cater to his every need, and they try to emulate how he is because he's the top of the totem pole.
And those that get promoted, just in a regular company, are those that follow the vision of the company, and it would be the same here.
Well, I think it takes it a step further, though, because I think it's more,
But if the company doesn't have a good vision...
Right, because a company will...
You're right, Brian, yeah.
Yeah, you're right, because typically companies that do well, hire people that have various
Well, I'm not saying that it's a
personalities and-
successful company. I'm just
Right.
saying
No, that's a good
generally
point.
what's,
Yeah.
That's a good point.
what they're doing. Did you ever fill out a knowledge report? This knowledge report was really interesting to me because in a way it's kind of like a confession of sorts, maybe
Yeah.
even or
Like the
or
Catholic
others, or
Church,
you're
right?
writing it down.
I'll tell you something, guys. It never set right with me. It never set right. I thought it was kind of like a snitching order.
Right, right.
Like, Hitler's youth. I mean, some of these Hitler's youth would turn in their parents.
Sure, and well, this is true in communism as well.
Yeah, in communism, yeah. And it just never set right. I would do it. I probably didn't do it as much as many people did, but I can remember one.
What would you have written? Yeah, give us an example.
Okay, but here, one person wrote a knowledge report on me, and I went and I says, "Hey, what the hell are you doing? Why don't you come and ask me about these things? Why don't you just confront me face to face if you have some complaint about me?" And they said, "Oh, you're making it hard for me to write a knowledge report." I said, "Hey, what the fuck? We could have handled it with two-way communication. And meanwhile, you're writing up this report on me that, maybe there's some mitigating circumstances why I acted the way I did. You don't even want to know about it." And it just, it never set right with me, honestly.
Yeah, it's like snitching, and
It is.
like,
It's not like snitching. It is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, like growing up in Chicago, that's a thing you don't do, because you can get in some trouble.
Let's put it this way: if you see somebody who may be stealing money from Treasury,
Yeah.
that would be a good idea. Although I would go to,
Right.
I live differently. I'd go to the person and say, "Hey, what the fuck are you doing? Put the money back. Come
Right.
on, But short of having that bit of confront, you're right. I saw Johnny James stealing money from Treasury at such and such a time on the 23rd of November, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. See, it's exactly unlike a male prison, but almost completely like a female prison, where it often, rather than no snitching at all, like snitches get stitches, generally in the male version, in the women's version, it's constant. This person's doing this, like overload, probably
Really?
a lot of lying.
I had no idea.
Yeah. I've watched exposés on this. It's very different. Now, the same kind of hierarchy applies, the powerful win, but
Yeah.
calling people out, there is no snitching is
Well, it's funny.
overdone as opposed to underdone.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll give you an example where it was a good idea that this was done. Dwayne Powell was looking at a house around the corner from mine to buy it. He's by himself. It's the evening, and he's looking in the windows, and a lady across the street thought he looked suspicious, so she called the West Dallas police.
Yeah.
They came and they confronted him, and he says, "Am I breaking any laws?" Blah, blah, blah. He gave him a bunch of crap. Nick Pye, who was the arresting officer, says, "Hey, man, you're under arrest. Can I look in your car?" Sure enough, in the trunk of their blacked-out van, he found 5 license plates from different states, 5 handguns, a stun gun, 2 rifles, 1 with a silencer, and 2,000 rounds of ammunition. That was a good knowledge report.
Yeah, that's a good example of
That's a good knowledge
Yeah.
report. But the little petty bullshit that's written up is
Right.
just beyond your
Yeah.
belief.
Sure.
Yeah. And it's
You
kind
know,
of funny. It's stark opposite of the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church has that secrecy, environment where you don't talk about the
Right.
homosexuality, you don't talk about the child, rapes, you don't talk. And it's this, the Keepers on Netflix. That's really popular right now, about that nun that told on the priest, and all of a sudden she was murdered. But it's funny how stark opposite, like compared to the Catholic Church and Scientology. Scientology encourages you to tell on people. It's just
Yeah. But I mean, some of the stuff is petty. Like John Jones called me a lazy bastard. I don't think he should speak to me this way.
Yeah.
This is true. I mean,
Well, but and you had the example when we were in LA. I think maybe it was Becky, about the person that was talking about the church at like a grocery store. You remember this, where someone was in line in the grocery
yeah.
store? You remember that?
yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, but you should remind
go.
because the audience doesn't know.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. If you want to expound on it.
I forget exactly what was said.
I think Becky was saying that someone was in the grocery store line and was talking to the person in front of them, overheard someone in the line talking negatively about Scientology.
And they confronted him on it.
And
yeah.
they confronted him, and you said they would then have to go back and make a knowledge report that I saw some random person in a
Yep.
grocery store saying this
would.
about
They would. And
You could spend a lot of your day doing this. I mean, if you were
exactly.
going to be
exactly.
And
Perfect.
some people do spend a good portion of their day doing it. they don't live in a real world. And in a real world, as far as I'm concerned, somebody's do something. Look, confront the person, work it out. Take it up with the person. Yeah. But that's not encouraged. Write the knowledge report. Let somebody else handle it.
Yeah. It's a little bit of what's happening on college campuses. Just email the dean. Don't talk it out with the professor. Just
you got it.
Go right to the top.
Well, the other thing that's come out of Leah's show that I found very, very interesting is, especially in her early career, where you had met her and she had just got the part of the King of Queens, and I'm sure a lot of people would understand how much work that is just to do a sitcom like that. All of the work that has to go into prep and learning your lines and, really networking with people and all that stuff. But then her expectation was then to go from that job and go work, multiple, like 20, 30 hours a week still at Scientology on different things.
No, you have to go in for study 2.5 hours a day. Your day in Scientology does not end with just saying I'm a Scientologist. They expect you to come in and do 2.5 hours of study at least 5 days a week.
What's the study? What does that entail? What would an average day be?
Okay, let's say you're doing a course on the Way to Happiness booklet. There would be a checklist, or a check sheet rather, and you would study certain things in this book, and then another person would check you out to consult your understanding of what you studied, and you would do that to another person.
So I'm learning a textbook, essentially.
Yeah, you are doing that, yeah. Or you could go in and you could be getting auditing, which is another word for counseling, and you'd expect to be with your auditor at least 2.5 hours a day. Some of the sessions are shorter than that, but then when you're through with that, you'd go back into the course room and do some other study of.
And I'm paying for this, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
It just blows me away. I mean, it blows me away. Just imagining being in her position, working in this new field or working on this new show, really wanting to do a good job, then also having to then go do this, 2 hours, 3 hours a day. Just imagine your job, Brian. You get home, you're exhausted. You had a 12, 13-hour day. Then you still are required to go in for another.
It does sound like a little bit of. There's a slight analogy to what I've heard of the Amway sales folks, which you had a little bit of kind of some bad sales practices there, and the idea was you're not supposed to sell this stuff, but you were extraordinarily encouraged to buy the books, listen to more tapes, to do so much sales training, and that you had to pay for it.
Yeah,
and that's that. I think that's the idea, and you could do so much training that you're always going to be in the red. And if you didn't do this, then you really weren't part of the team. Yeah. You just don't want it hard enough. And like the guys making all the money were the higher end people making all the tapes.
Well, yeah, in any pyramid marketing, that's who makes the money. Mm-hmm. The bottom feeders just.
But you create a culture. It's if without that culture that. You're not trying hard enough. You don't have what it takes. You've got to have more faith in the system. You're the problem, not the system. I think is the parallel that I'm trying to draw.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you how you can prove that out. What you do is you take a stick about 3 feet long, find a jackass or a donkey, tie the stick to the back of his neck, and at the end of it hang a carrot.
Yeah.
And then have that donkey try to see if he can get that carrot. And this is basically what happens in situations like that. You're going after a carrot. You'll never get it.
Yeah.
Look, in Scientology, those lower end actions, I'm telling you this, and I tell it in my book, Ruthless, okay? That these first things you do, there's value to them. But these later actions they say you could become a spiritual being who leaves his body and can operate without the use of a body and a set of eyes, like you could, outside of your body, go to another place and read a book or see what's in the next room. That has never been achieved by anybody I ever met or knew in my 42 years. And that is the carrot that people keep on going after. They always think it's only me that didn't achieve it. I'll probably get it on the next level.
But on Amway, I mean, this is maybe where it diverges a little bit. They will constantly trot out the person that made triple diamond, right? So you may never get there, but they're trotting out people who have. Now, was Scientology, if somebody made OT3, was there a celebration? Were there people that were advancing that you could look as role models?
Yes, but now I'm telling you something. When you finish a level, you write a success story. And these success stories are glowing things, but they're never specific. Like, You'll never get a person saying, okay, I got out of my body today and I saw how many chairs were in the room in the house next door to me. Never. It's always, now I can see where I'm going to do better in life. It's just
very vague.
It's vague.
Yeah.
It's a generalization. You know?
Were they inspiring to some people at all, though?
Yes, they were. But people would look up to them and thinking, I can't wait till I get to that level. And the person who got on the level is always on a withhold of thinking to themselves, I didn't really get what I thought I was going to get out of it. But I can't say that to people because I'd be in treason then.
Yeah.
Interesting. So unlike like the triple diamond in Amway, that's like, I've arrived, I'm here. Even if you make the next level, everyone is still looking up to.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's where Tom Cruise's gold medal ceremony, I think he's kind of the top echelon of like what people look up to.
Well, no, Tom, he got a Medal of Valor.
Yeah.
It's a Freedom Medal, but his was a Freedom Medal of Valor. And look, Tom Cruise is an actor. Mm-hmm. He's not a philosopher, okay? Let's face it.
I would agree.
And the thing is, because he is a famous actor, people look up. He's considered to be what L. Ron Hubbard called an opinion leader. In other words, like a famous actor or a musician or maybe somebody who's great in some industry who's achieved fantastic results with his company. These people are looked up to as opinion leaders. And the whole idea of it is so that people who maybe aren't in Scientology figure, hey, wait a minute, Tom Cruise is in Scientology? I got to check it out. They can mold the opinion of many people, okay? And as far as he's a nice guy. I met him many times, and then, well, you know, I have no other opinion other than that. I think socially he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
And
well, you have told us some stories that we haven't covered in the interviews, and I know it's kind of off of the A&E special that we're talking about, but I think these are very interesting. People would find value in them. Tom Cruise was out for 8 years. He left the church for about 8 years, something like that, and then he came back. And what was his wife's name? I'm blanking on her name.
Holmes?
Katie Holmes. Thank you. Katie Holmes. You guys had you and Becky had some interesting stories about. Okay, go ahead.
Wait, when you say who was out when he was married to
first
the,
Nicole,
No.
then
He was
Katie.
out when he was married to Nicole.
Yeah, Nicole,
He was out.
yeah,
But when
yeah.
he came back, Becky was telling me, you guys were expounding on like what you guys did when Katie was there, like how you started hanging around her and started becoming friends with her and like that.
Yeah, okay, well, I played for Tom Cruise's birthday party on the ship. I was the leader of the band in those days. And I don't know how I got to be the leader since I couldn't even be
You couldn't play any music
third trumpet
at all.
player.
Right,
Yeah, but
exactly.
I could lead a band. Yeah. Anyway, prior to that, Katie wanted to record a song to give to Tom as a little present.
Sure.
So Dave said, look, I'll get my dad to produce you. There's a studio in L.A. that we own, we meaning the Church of Scientology, called the Mad Hatter. It's Chick Corea's old studio that the church bought. State of the art, really nice. I went there with Katie, and she went in the recording room where she recorded this piece. Peter Schlesch wrote the music for it. She came back in the studio, we listened to it, and boy, it didn't sound good. She says, God, what do I do? So I said, look, do what Frank Sinatra did when he got older. You don't hold on to a note. Once you hit it, you get off it. Because if you hold on to it and you're not professionally trained, the flaws in your voice will show up. Like when in his later years, if he sang like, I've got you under my skin, I just let go of the note. If you say, I got you, there'll be little flaws that show up. She went back in the studio, did that, come back in, man, it sounded like $1 million. So we both got a big win out of it. Mm-hmm. She loved it. And when his birthday was going on,
Tom Cruise
on the ship, she came out and sang it with the band.
Oh, live.
Wow. Live, yeah. Oh, yeah, live. And then she also gave him the CD that she made of that. It was a big hit.
Yeah.
Katie was a very social, lovable type person.
Yeah. Well, you can tell she didn't make it very long.
No, and I'll tell you, she had to skip out on that marriage. She did it undercover.
Yeah.
In order to get the divorce. It wasn't like it was right out in the open.
Right.
You know that, right?
Yeah, well, kind of. Yeah, we know the third hand, only what we were told by we don't have the inside info like you.
Well, her dad's a divorce lawyer, and he set the whole thing up so that she left one day. She had her own phone that couldn't be traced because you didn't know if the church was going to be tapping your phone.
Yeah. See, that's something we don't know,
Nor do I, but I know this, that as far as I'm concerned, if they had the way to get away with it and do it, they would do it.
Yeah. And Becky was talking about how they would strategically implant Scientologists around whoever they're trying to get committed, like the Katie Holmes. Yeah.
In their house, they had people there working for them who were Scientologists, and that way they could keep track of everything that went down.
Become their friends and confidants, and I mean that's
it sounds a lot like the commissar in the Soviet army, right? To make sure that they're not going to defect to the other side, that someone's sending reports back to the Kremlin.
Yes, yeah. I'm telling you, man. But that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And when you're a member of the church, as I said earlier in this interview, you get in that state of mind over a long period of time, or maybe a short period, but it's done little by little by little. So that when you're doing these things, you consider it's for the greatest good.
Yeah.
No, for the greatest good of the church.
Right.
That's all. If it matches up with something the church is going to achieve, then it's considered the greatest good.
Yeah. So for the second season, second season's coming out, Scientology in the Aftermath, Leah's show with Mike Rinder on A&E. What are you looking forward to? Like, if you, I know it's kind of a loaded question, but if there was something in the season that you're like, yeah, maybe we should hit more on this or continue to focus on this, like, what would keep you, what do you think would be the most powerful?
I think anybody who's hearing this interview should make sure they see it. Like, if you don't have cable, find some friend who has it. Make sure you see it, because I think there's going to be some bombshells. So delicate that I don't even want to talk about it. How do you like that?
Oh, wow.
What's the name of it again? If you're going to set it for your TiVo or something to record.
It's Scientology in the Aftermath.
Yeah, Scientology in the Aftermath, yeah. I would definitely see it, because just from talking to Mike, and I know they have some really pretty bad stuff they're going to report on, and got people there to talk up.
Yeah,
and this is what's happening since that first season, and I guess that was such a success that A&E put them on for another one.
Yeah, and a special on Memorial Day.
They had a 2 hour special.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But that's not coming out until the fall. That's not going to be a summer thing, okay?
Right.
But I would definitely see it. Yeah, how'd they like that? Maybe I'll tell you guys in private after this is over.
Okay.
With your sworn secrecy that you're not going to go on the fucking air and tell what I told you.
You're not going to write a knowledge report on you, Ron.
Right,
I'm not going to do that.
And it's going to be.
I lose all my notes anyways.
Yeah, there you go.
And he forgets anyways. Well, the one of the last things I had on my docket to cover was the victim shaming exercises. Now, when we were on the car ride over, you made a brilliant quote or a brilliant statement on how this works. But essentially, in the church, what they do is if something bad happens to you, they bring you in for auditing, and they try and tell you, what did you do in a past life to pull this in? And Ron, you can expound on this more. Yeah.
That is what happens. That is what happens. Let's say you got mugged, as an example. You were out and somebody held you up and took all of your money. They would take you in session, and by asking you specific questions, get you to review something that happened in this earlier on in this life, or maybe a past life, that you did that made you pull that in, or made it that you wanted that to happen to you. In other words, you got mugged. You got all your money taken from you. Their attitude is, you must have done something to pull that in.
So if you were John Dillinger, then maybe it's good karma that it happens to me. Right? John Dillinger being, the gangster, a bank robbing gangster back in the 30s.
No, more.
No, not that. No, it's if you got held up by John Dillinger.
Oh, so it was direct. Okay.
Yeah. In other words, something were done to you of a bad nature. If you got held up, or you got shot or beat up or something like that, you would be taken in for you to find out why this happened to you.
Why this keeps repeating in my life. So it's not that it's the opposite of karma then.
Yeah,
Right.
look, there is certain randomity that happens in life. I mean, if everything you would ever do or were known, why live life? It's just,
So,
there's no game to it
I might
at
be
all.
told that it's something about me
Right.
that brings this on.
Exactly.
And
You-
that I
you-
need to fix that.
You wouldn't be told that, but you would be led to come to your own conclusion that it was you that did something that made it happen to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that clear enough?
Yeah,
Because I don't
absolutely.
want anybody
Sure.
listening to this to get the wrong idea.
Yeah, no,
If-
that
if
makes sure.
something- Yeah, if something bad happens to you, they have processes in place that will get you to the point of understanding that you did something in this life or in a past life that brought that into you.
Yes.
Right,
So-
yeah, because there's a difference between saying you are responsible for this
It's the ultimate
and
victim shaming.
asking questions about.
That's right. Because, look, you could be mugged and stuff like that, and then you say, okay, well, look, it happened. I don't know the guy. I don't know how to identify him. I just got to go on with my life and just realize, hey, it happened to me. I'll work harder, make some more money, take responsibility for it happening to you. That's a little different. That's very different than what I just said. What I just said was that you would come up with the reason that it happened to you is something that you did priorly to make that happen to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like an internal something in my character, right? That or something that I'm at least partially responsible
No,
for.
not partially, but you did something that brought that on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so my lives are linked. If I'm living
Yes.
multiple lives, they are connected. They're
Yes.
not okay.
That's right. And in other words, I don't know if I'm beating a dead horse here, but I want to make sure the audience gets this. You have something bad happen to you. You then have to sit down with an auditor and come up with what you did priorly that made that happen to you.
Yeah.
To try to explain some traumatic event. Obviously, being robbed is a traumatic event. So
Yeah.
you're trying to explain this through a past life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you did something in a past life that then made that
Yeah.
happen to you. That made that take place.
But
well, now hold
yeah, go ahead.
on
Yeah,
a
go
minute
ahead.
because
So
I'm not
I could
done.
interpret, then I might infer
Yeah.
myself, even without being told that I am responsible for this. I could infer, I could make that leap myself.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. That's right. In other words, what you did priorly made that happen to you. My question is this: if that's the case, how come they're not questioning people in the Church of Scientology to find out why all these people are doing this to them?
Yeah, all of the negative attention from Leah's show,
Yeah.
from Going Clear, from all the documentaries, from all the movies. Why isn't David or the Sea Org being pulled in and going through this process, right?
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant.
I don't think they are being pulled in and going through this process. I think they're thinking everybody who's doing it is a fucking liar and is no good. And we're the victims of this person doing it to us.
But again-
and we're only doing good for the entire planet.
Yeah.
And look what they're doing to us.
Yeah. Well,
I'm afraid that isn't the case, guys. Okay.
Yeah.
They have abused people's lives. They've made people disconnect from their family, from friends. Look if my daughter Lori were to talk to me, she has a Scientology employer. She would lose her job that day. None of her friends would speak to her. Now, where does that make any sense? Simply because I couldn't stand the conditions I was living under and decided, hey, wait a minute. I don't want to live this way. Just let me get on with my life.
And this is true with other fundamentalist religions, Jehovah's Witnesses, for example.
Yep.
But you could be very Orthodox Jew or an Orthodox Muslim or even an Orthodox Hindu or Sikh. You know that this can also happen to you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, God forbid if you're a Sikh and you want to cut your hair.
Well, that's-
you could lose your community.
Well, the interesting thing, and I don't expect Ron to really comment on this. Maybe Brian, you have some thoughts on this. But the interesting thing for me is when we're doing the social and we're watching Leah's show and we're seeing Twitter's on fire. The one thing I'm noticing is there's a lot of people that are either Christian or Muslim or Hindu or whatever that are, showing support for people, which is great, but they're also kind of putting in their own caveats of Jesus would never do this or Muhammad would never do this or blah, 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 So it's really it's like this kind of like Scientology is looked at as well. It's kind of that inherent bigotry. My religion would never do that, So I don't know if you've witnessed any of this, but I'm seeing more and more of it,
Well, you could, and I'm not sure what Jesus or Muhammad, if they were people, would actually do. But
Right.
but you know what church organizations can do.
Yeah.
and that's the problem.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the religion itself.
It's the
whether
organizations, right.
Scientology's religion or Christianity, Islam, the list goes on. It's how it's practiced within that microcosm.
That's true, but don't overlook the fact that L. Ron Hubbard wrote in policy these things that people are carrying forward to this day and will always be carrying forward, and that is attack, don't defend, don't take up the issues, character assassinate. That was built into the DNA with his policy letters.
And that's a big deal, right? That it's a really big deal because in some ways I've heard like Faisal al-Mukhtar and some of the folks that are kind of fighting like Orthodox Islam, and they're saying, okay, well the Bible is not the word of God, but it's inspired. Right, but the Quran is actually literally the word of God, and there's a big difference there. And maybe in Scientology, if L. Ron Hubbard is held to that same standard, like this is the word, as opposed to he was some sort of inspiration. Maybe it's that orthodox that you could not question L. Ron Hubbard. Right, that is gospel.
It is that you cannot question.
That is the word.
Yeah.
You cannot question him. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you. Let's say you're in a church or in an org or wherever you are. And you figure, now, how shall we do this? Let's see what L. Ron Hubbard has to say. And they have source information retrieval. I think it's SIR, it's called. And if you have that particular thing, and you wouldn't find it in a local organization, but at Gold, which is the main base, you can look and find out everything that L. Ron Hubbard ever said about something, and that's what you would do. Mm-hmm. Your independent thinking or just being able to observe something and handle it based on your observation and your own judgment is not valid.
You need to interpret that literally. Then you can't say, well, what he meant was probably, and then try to shoot it up. No, that's a problem.
If you said that, you'd have your knuckles rapped and you'd say, wait a minute, what did he say? What word don't you understand in there? And you'd be nailed to the cross, basically. Not really, but you'd have to get exactly what he said and follow that. Not what you think it should be, or you as you said, interpret. There's no room for that.
That's the problem with a fundamentalist reading of the text.
Yeah.
But right now, there could be other religions that way. Right now, we're talking about Scientology.
And thank you. Yes, thank you.
And the people whose lives have been harmed by it. And I'll tell you, this is why. Look, my book come out in paperback. I'd like you to read it, and I'll tell you what else I'd like you to do. Get a copy. When you finish reading it, loan it to somebody else. And loan it to somebody else. And get as many people to read this as possible.
Right. And an author that says that, it means you're not your first thing is not the money. Right?
No, it is.
Give my book to someone else.
It was never the money. It's to get the data out. Look, when I left, I wasn't going to do anything. Finally,
you were going to play music.
I was going to play music, sell extra-genies, and write humorous books. The humorous books are funny. They're about my growing up in a cold region in the 40s and 50s. And I enjoyed doing things like that, and especially music. Once it got to the point where my daughters would no longer talk to me, and said, one daughter's husband said, we're through with you and Becky forever. So you know what? Fuck you, I'm writing a book. Why a book? I'll tell you why. If I had a blog, how many people could I get? Maybe 2,000, 3,000 people? I knew, simply because of being the father of David, I could get national exposure. And I was on 2020. I was on Late Night with Seth Meyers. I was on with Megyn Kelly, Australian TV. That's a lot of people that got exposed to this. My book was #1 in the bestseller list, first week it come out, New York Times. That's a lot of people who are now reading this. And hopefully, they're loaning their books out to other people. Look, I'm a Marine veteran. I go to the VA for my medical care. I gave a book to the advocate, which is a guy down there who handles any complaints or any commendations you want to make. And I went in one day to see him just on a regular check. How you doing, buddy? He's, oh, man, I wish I knew you were coming in. I said, why is that? He said, I wanted you to autograph my book, but my brother-in-law's reading it.
Oh, perfect.
So people are doing that.
Perfect.
My wife worked in marketing for the church, and it was a statistic that for every book you sell, 6 people will read it. That's what I want to happen.
That's great.
You get a book, loan it to somebody else. Loan it to somebody else. Maybe somebody else will buy it, loan it to somebody else. Get the story, because it's a chronological order of how this evolved from what seemingly was a great little self-help group back in the 60s and 70s into what it is today, which, as far as I'm concerned, Scientology is a cult that's disguised as a religion operating as a business. And people are getting conned. Simple as that.
Yeah, and to sum up what you were saying with we're focused on Scientology, I'm an atheist. I see, we've had people on that have shown how all religions have done terrible atrocities to the world, but in the social world, it's either my religion is better than Scientology or all religions are just as bad as Scientology. It doesn't matter. Those comparisons don't matter. We're talking about Scientology. That's what we're talking about, what's being done in the church, what it's done to people and families. And that's the conversation that should be happening, not who's right, what religions are right, what are wrong. That's moot in my opinion. And
Well,
go ahead.
I'll make a closing statement.
Yeah.
If I were to start a religion, I'll tell you what the rules would be. It'd be 3 rules.
Go ahead.
Help something, number 1. Help somebody. And number 3, don't send me any money.
That's fantastic. And before I let you go, Ron, we've heard the story. You've been on a lot of different interviews now. Do you have any updates with your family? Have you had any word from any of the kids or grandkids? Or
No, I'll be honest with you. I think I've lost them to the dark side. I think it's just, I hate to say that because I always have hope that we'll get back together, but I don't know what could bring that about. Maybe positive thinking or something where maybe they'll see the Scientology in the aftermath and start thinking, hey, wait a minute, we've been conned, which they have been, let's face it, all right?
Yeah, I think that accepting reality, but also having hope.
I do have hope, but it's as the years go by now, it's getting a little slimmer. I hate to say that because I know my wife is the perennial optimist. I mean, she can go in a room and see a light where there isn't any.
Yeah,
I still have a bit of hope that we'll get together someday, though.
but that's the thing. But as long as is that your happiness is not based on the hope. If you can accept a reality, it's okay to have hope.
That's right.
I think
that you're exactly right, Brian. And I'm enjoying my life because I'm doing a lot of gigs and I do these interviews, which I'm glad because hopefully it'll help some people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what Leah's show is doing. That's what you coming out and doing public talks, which you have two in June coming up.
Yeah,
you'll be at 2 libraries, and then you got one in July, and you got another one in Houston coming up in the future.
Right.
And one of the things I want to make sure people understand you want to do talks. So if people are interested, just reach out to you at your website.
Which is therealronmiscavige.com.
Yep. And your social media and all of that, because your story's powerful and it's constantly evolving. And we're seeing how the story, through the show, through what you're saying, through how things are changing constantly, people are interested and they want to learn more. And I think the more people learn, I think the power over your family starts to dwindle. And, hopefully these things will get them to say, hey, what the hell are we doing? And figure it out, and then you guys can.
Yeah, it would be great because I tell you, I had a lot of fun with the kids when they were growing up. Boy, I tell you, even my grandchildren, when I'd go on leave up to Vermont where they lived, New Hampshire, and I'd love to do that again,
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, Ron, thank you so much for joining us for the special edition. We'll make sure we get it out. And Brian, do you have any?
No, other than thanks again for your time. We do appreciate your stories and being involved, but always being measured. I don't see a lot of emotions flying out of it. I feel like this is a measured critique and a fair one.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I just can't hold hate in my heart or anger. Look, Nelson Mandela said a brilliant thing. He said, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. It just... maybe if you hold love in your heart, a little bit of forgiveness for everything,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Well, I sound like a preacher when I say that, but what I mean.
No, that's I think it's a great quote.
That is philosophy.
That is philosophy.
So we'll take it.
All right.
Ron,
All right.
thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to Myth Informed. Myth Informed is brought to you by Mythicist Milwaukee. Producer Sean Frasick, associate producers Fritz Blondone and Kristen Whitaker Hood, engineer Josh Benishek, technical consultant Jason Lawson, and hosts Brian, Dimitri, Jacob, and Joseph. Every week we produce a new podcast that sheds light on religion, secularism, and mythology. If you enjoy this show, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/mythicist. Mythicist Milwaukee also brings major secular conferences and debates to the Milwaukee area, along with community events, both local and online. To support us in bringing future events, become a member at mythicistmilwaukee.com to receive member-only benefits. You can also visit mythicistmilwaukee.com and hit the donate button located at the bottom of each page to place a financial donation amount of your choice. And now, the closing theme, written and performed by Shelley Siegel.
There was a time when everyone believed Helios in the sun, Poseidon in the sea, Athena's wisdom and beauty, and Hades underneath, Isis of fertility, and ether of the Greeks. They all lie at rest, and who will be the next to die? You know they are all myths, and who will be the next to die? There was a time when everyone believed Helios in the sun, Poseidon in the sea, Athena's wisdom and beauty, and Hades underneath, Isis of fertility, and ether of the Greeks. They all